Hello, 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 everybody, it's your boy Jmulls here. Today we're talking about patch 6.34 Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. Got a little bit of a theory video for you all. So, riding high off my successful prediction for Xenos' story at Endwalker. Not joking, I kind of predicted that entire thing and I loved it, but let's talk about this new character that they introduced with the patches of Endwalker that's quickly become one of my favorites just because of where this story can go, their potential, and just how cool of a character they already are right now. Let's talk about Zero, because not too long ago we had the live letter for patch 6.3 of Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. And in that live letter, we received a new trailer, which will probably be playing as B-roll right now for you all. And this trailer had a lot of information jam-packed into it, but it also had what, in my opinion, some very choice and interesting lines of dialogue that feels like they were spliced and split up. And I'm not sure if we can necessarily pair the line of dialogue up with the scene of what's happening in the game, if that makes sense. We normally can't do that as is. But I feel like that's especially true this go-around, especially with two of Golbez's lines, which we'll talk about in a second. But before we get into the theory proper about where I think they're going to go with the character Zero and what I feel like her ultimate fate's going to be, I want to just address some general information that I was able to glean from this trailer. But I want to transition real quickly to Golbez, because I feel like he's going to be a very central character for quite a while. If you're familiar with the story of Final Fantasy IV, I don't want to spoil Final Fantasy IV for a lot of people, but for those who know the story, I want to predict that I think most of the story beats will be similar to Final Fantasy IV, but the ending will be different. If that'll make sense for those who know the character arc of Golbez from Final Fantasy IV, because in Final Fantasy XIV, Golbez is trying to get out of the 13th. I believe he's made that abundantly clear. He even says in the trailer that he views it as a purgatory of death and rebirth forever. He doesn't specifically say that's the 13th, but through context clues and the overall life cycle of a void scent, I feel that we can pretty much lock in the idea that he's referring to the 13th when he's saying it's a purgatory of death and rebirth forever. He's not fond of the 13th. He wants out. He wants to leave. He also says another line of dialogue where I feel is interesting based on the words that he's saying, but it'll be more interesting to find out who he's talking to. Because he says, "Join me and we will seek the promised land, a glorious kingdom of light where all may know death's sweet embrace." He views death as a gift, and it kind of makes sense when you really think about it. If you're coming from the 13th, right, where everyone's essentially immortal because you're all void sent, and you're caught up in this perpetual cycle of feeding on others, dying and being reborn with the constant fear, the lingering doubt that you yourself may be consumed and then it's just lights out for you, and you become part of this greater whole. You can understand how Golbez's motivation will be to find death in some way. I feel that it's also a little bit poetic that Zero is a Reaper, and I know Reapers in the context of Final Fantasy XIV aren't necessarily emissaries of death like they are in a lot of mythologies, and I believe that Golbez is referring to the first when he's talking about a glorious kingdom of light. And it makes sense, right? If you are able to siphon out some of the light from the flood of light on the first, transport it through customs to the 13th, then you can kind of solve two problems with one solution, two birds with one stone, right? You take away a lot of that excess light from the first, while giving light to a light-parched 13th. So I could even see us at some point in the future teaming up with Golbez for whatever reason to try and do this. Or they'll just stick with this idea that, hey, he might mean well, but his methodologies, he might end up meaning well, but his methodologies to arrive there are villainous. And to wrap up the information we got from the trailer, for some reason we go to Golemald in hunt of Void Scent. That's what I gleaned from the website. I'll leave a link in the description down below. I feel that a subplot that could be made there is we want to show Zero around where Xenos was for memory's sake. That could be like a B plot for the patch. We don't know the trial, but the end of 6.2 heavily indicated that we're fighting at least one or two Archfiends. The one of fire and water. I could see them like teaming up, or fire turning the water one into the super powerful Archfiend. I could see something like that happen. they don't want to announce who it is. So it could be some modification of an Archfiend. They just don't want to show the character model. But to me, especially with this trailer, it seems like the Endwalker patches are slowly building to Golbez being a threat on the source, instead of some threat secluded to the 13th. Now, where Golbez's story will go from here, I feel will follow a similar line that it did in Final Fantasy IV, because I don't believe Golbez will be the big bad. For those who don't know, Final Fantasy games are notorious, not necessarily notorious, but are known to always, or most of the time, have this one character that you think is going to be the end boss or the main final villain, but at the end, after you beat that fight, they announce, hey, this is a whole new villain you have to fight, and they're the real big bad. And that villain in Final Fantasy IV was a character or a villain called Zeromus. The name might ring a bell for you. And I feel that the biggest question for me going forward is, where the hell is Zero going as a character? And there's two big possibilities in my mind. She turns to Zeromus and dies for some reason, either as a sacrifice, or B, she becomes a villain, so we have to kill her. Or the other possibility that I think is probably more likely is that she turns to Zeromus for whatever reason. Maybe she becomes overwhelmed by, void energies, or darkness, or just Golbez's energy. She turns into Zeromus, and we save her, kind of like we did with Ron with Shiva, in that Shiva fight in Eden, if you recall. I think her turning into Zeromus at some point, with just how Final Fantasy IV, the patches and Endwalker as a whole, have been, is inevitable. The question for me is the context surrounding her turning into Zeromus. Maybe she gets split into two different beings, half becomes Zeromus, and the other half fights Zeromus with us, maybe? But her story really feels like she is learning what it means to be human. You know that trope where an alien comes to Earth and has to learn what it's like to be human amongst other humans, has to learn all the little idiosyncrasies? And I hear a popular theory going around that at some point Zero will become a villain and we'll just have to kill her, and that's how her story will end up. I don't buy it. That feels very antithetical to what Final Fantasy XIV's writing has become. I mean, they've never really shied away from tropes, but they end up using them in interesting and nuanced ways, which makes me believe that Zero will eventually stick around. 14's writing team isn't really one to just build up a character to kill them off, to get an emotional moment out of it. Zero feels like a character they are building up for the long haul, to me, so that she can be this character in the story representing the post 6.0 era of the game that will travel around with us for whatever reason, while the other Scions may be brought in from time to time when they are needed, but the story can always feel fresh and new. I definitely believe she'll be our primary traveling companion in 7.0. I fully believe that. And someone brought up a great point in one of my comments of my reaction to the 6.3 trailer from a week ago, that Zero and the Warrior of Light's connection might end up becoming akin to a buddy cop duo, and honestly, I kind of find that hilarious. But I feel that the real overarching narrative theme they want to pursue for her, and you're gonna need to bear with me because I need to talk your way through this, is that she could kind of represent the idea of what if Xenos turned out differently. I know she's not anything like Xenos, but there is one key characteristic here where comparison can be made. Two, actually. She was connected with him for so long, and all she cares about right now is consuming ether. She's entirely almost secluded herself from outside help. She's opening up a little bit with 6.2, and seemingly with 6.3, they're going to take another step forward with that story. But I feel that the narrative arc they want to pursue with her as a character is having a character go from being really and purely selfish to a character becoming selfless. Where when we first met her, in order to get her to go anywhere with us, we had to continually offer her ether. We had to essentially bribe her to come with us. It was always an exchange. We got her help in combat, or with knowledge, but we had to give her ether. And she even tried to do that at the end of 6.2, but even then she was like, yeah, you'll have to keep paying me, but you know what, this apple will do. And she starts eating the apple. It feels like she is opening up. And I feel one of the big moments that will push her character forward in 6.3 will be when she is defeated. We saw that in the cuts in the trailer, where she's like saying, someone out there, please help me, and she collapses. I feel like the Warrior of Light's gonna come in, save the day there, and then she'll be appreciative of that. There's a story there to be had with her opening up and learning to care about the wider world and discover her origins as a person before she turned into a void scent. And I hope they explore it. And that's not before she turned into a void scent, but just overall learning what it means to be human. And they could really pursue this narrative theme with this character, because she's an excellent canvas to tell this story with, in my opinion. And its creative business unit 3, they tend to dig into characters' backstories like that, so I have full faith that they will do that and pursue that as their story. We're in this kind of weird period of time where I feel like 7.0 is probably more easy to predict in some ways than the rest of the patches. Because I feel like the biggest question mark with the story of the patches is if it's self-contained to the Endwalker patch cycle, or if this is serving as a prologue of sorts to 7.0. Because I feel like either way, 7.0 is Miracidia. They've hinted at it so much, a giant continent with a deep history between people and dragons, a giant event with Vritra and Azdaia happened there, a giant battle. It feels like they are building up to it, and I don't exactly buy that they would do all this development, hint, towards Miracidia, have all this development with Vritra, Azdaia, the 13th, Void Portals, just for us to go to the new world or something. Maybe they do the Endwalker thing where Miracidia is just a zone or two, and then we go to the new world for the others, or parts of the 13th. But I feel like they're just going to go with this one new area idea for 7.0, since it will be the first main expansion since the end of the Hydaelyn Zodiac arc. Building up one singular location and fleshing that out could be a good opportunity for a soft reset of the story, if they want to go that route, either with 7.0 or with 6.1. And we know there's some, like, big void gate at Miracidia. It may have closed by now, but could probably just, like, reopen it, let's be honest. How Azdaia went to the 13th initially. I feel like we're going to Miracidia, and I feel like when we do, Zero will be with us along the way. Because if you want to hear my opinion, I believe this patch cycle is a prologue towards 7.0, and that 7.0 will really delve into this Miracidia Dragons and the Void story. And I don't think Golbez is the big final boss. I think he's going to be the character that transitions us from the patches to the main story of 7.0. Kind of like Ilberd, how Ilberd served as that big bad for the Heavensward patch cycle to bring us into Stormblood. I feel like that's what Golbez's role will be. But I'm going to call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Let me know your own opinions and your own theories in the comments down below as to where this story, especially with Zero, is going to go. Do you think she's going to die? Do you think she's going to turn into a villain? Do you think she'll stay by the Warrior of Light and the Scion side? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. Stay safe out there, everybody. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe out there, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.